Hello there, people of the internet. So this is not really a channel about being prepared, but I figure I'll go ahead and I'll make this video because with me, I'm, the guy living in the woods, eating MREs, surrounded by guns. So people just assume that I'm a guy who enjoys being prepared, and they are definitely correct. And I have these people, normally they're asking me about things that go bang like this right here. But occasionally they'll just ask me, hey, what do I need to do in order to be more prepared for a situation? Now, whenever I'm talking about being prepared for a situation, I'm not necessarily talking about full-on apocalypse. Like, for example, earlier this year, we had Hurricane Ian passing through the state of Florida, and I had a lot of friends and family in the state of Florida, Central Florida area, that were dealing with flooding and power loss and looting, and they were just dealing with a lot of issues down there that came from this hurricane, and they were definitely not prepared for it. So that being said, let me go ahead and give this little caveat. What you're going to see here today in this video on this channel is not free, so if you want to support my work and support what I do, then links to Patreon and Utreon are in the description below. Helping me there will definitely help me make more content more often. But normally when people think about being prepared, they think about just the things that make noise and send projectiles downrange. These are definitely a good preparation item. You should have a way to be able to keep yourself and your family safe. So whenever it comes to your primary tool to be able to make that happen, I always recommend, like, bare minimum, absolute minimum, 1,000 rounds to be able to run through whatever platform it is that you're wanting to run through. Just 1,000 rounds. That's a good minimum baseline for a lot of people. If you can't afford 1,000 rounds, like right up front, then just buy one box at a time. And eventually, as time progresses, you will find that you have managed to stack quite a few rounds. Now, whenever it comes to magazines for said particular tool, I always recommend like 10 magazines for that tool. Keep a lot of them loaded for just in case situations. Don't worry about spring tension. Don't worry about wearing out the mag. In the event that that happens, replace the spring, 20 years down the road if you need to. But if you can't do 10, get as many as you can to be able to protect yourself. So you need yourself at least one specific platform that you need to learn how to use. Go out, get training, make sure that yours works with whatever type of rounds that you decide to put through it. But get yourself at least one, learn how to use it, learn how to use it to keep your family and yourself safe. All right, so after that, that is, what most people look at. And that's where most people end whenever it comes to being prepared. But a dramatic amount of what we see, especially with natural disasters and whatnot, are things, preparedness items, that don't necessarily involve this right here. So I'm going to give you guys a rough baseline of what you would want and how long you would want it. Let's start off with like the bare minimum basics. You're going to want food, enough food to be able to last you, my personal opinion, at least bare minimum, absolute minimum, a month. There's been multiple times around here and in Central Florida where a hurricane has hit and people have been out of power for like several days or several weeks. I remember one time we got a power outage here and we went like 29 days or some ridiculous number without power. So get yourself some kind of food that is non-perishable, that does not require specialty storage options, like, it doesn't need refrigerated or anything like that. Things like dry goods or canned goods or MREs, whatever you want. If you want to do the freeze-dried foods, then go ahead and do that. If you want a good amount of food for not a lot of money, then dried goods like rice and beans, that's a good way to go. Pasta is also a good way to go. Get yourself enough food stored up and rotate it so you don't run out of shelf life. I have myself probably, rough estimations, about a year of food, but my family eats rice and beans and whatnot on a pretty regular basis, and we're consistently cycling it out. So long-term storage isn't necessarily something I have to worry about because we're consistently eating that stuff anyway. But a good way for long-term storage, if you feel like doing it, Mylar bags. You can store a lot of stuff in Mylar bags. Throw oxygen absorbers in there, close it up, and keep it inside of like a bucket or some sort of sealed container to stop rats or other various critters from getting to it. And that food will store for a very, very long time. If you're going to go like rice or something like that, go with like white bleached rice or something like that, because it doesn't have the oil that say brown rice does, which will cause it to spoil faster, unless you're like me and whatever rice you get won't last more than a couple of months before it's, you know, circled through, in which case that doesn't really matter. Up next, medical supplies and the knowledge to use them. If somebody needs like special medical treatment, maybe you have somebody who takes a particular medication, try to get more of that medication. Or if you have, you know, if somebody gets hurt, you have to know how to deal with it. I'm not talking about just, you know, somebody gets a scrap and you throw a Neosporin and a Band-Aid or something on it. If somebody gets hurt, like hurt, then have the equipment and have the knowledge of how to handle that. There's a lot of information on Google and YouTube that will teach you how to save somebody's life in the event that you need to. Make sure that you get plenty of equipment to be able to make sure that happens. So food, medical, ways to go pew, those are like the big three that people look at. So up next, whenever I say food, I'm also talking about water. Get yourself ways to purify water, get yourself a source of water. In my particular case, I have a spring-fed pond on my property. We are fine with water. And if you know how to purify it, I mean, you can use a variety of methods. You can boil it. You can do like the pool shock method if you know how to accumulate your ratios. I think I got that word wrong. But if you know your ratios, then you can do it safely using pool shock to purify your water. You can filter it with a whole variety of things. You can use cloth like a shirt. You can use coffee filters if you don't have anything else. Like anything that you can use. You can make natural filters using sand, dirt, rocks, and some other stuff. I might even make a video on making a natural water filter. But even though you filter it out, you still want to boil it. Just make sure there's no pathogens or anything like that that may have gotten through the filter. So up next, we're starting to get into the more niche things, batteries and whatnot for powering your electronics. That's always important. I recommend that you get yourself rechargeable batteries and you get yourself some sort of solar bank or hand crank bank so you can basically continue to charge those batteries indefinitely. Here in the state of Florida, there's no shortage of sunlight. This is the Sunshine State. So I have myself plenty of solar panels and plenty of chargers to charge my rechargeable batteries. So that's something that I don't have to worry about. That's a good way to go versus stockpiling non-rechargeable batteries, which are a finite resource and you will eventually run out. I always recommend that people have other non-electronic sources of light and other non-electronic sources of anything. So whenever it comes to non-electronic sources of light, if you don't have the batteries for a flashlight or something, then you can get yourself some candles. I always use candles whenever it comes to hurricane season versus relying on an electronic flashlight unless I'm actually looking around. You can get yourself lanterns, oil-powered lanterns. And just bear in mind that fire, if it tips over, it's hot, it'll burn stuff. Or if you're in enclosed space, the room might fill with smoke depending on what you're using as a fuel source, or it might suck the oxygen out. But non-electronic sources of light can also be used as sources of heat as well. If you're in an area that isn't like Florida and it gets really cold there, then you might want to consider getting a lot of clothing to protect yourself from winter and whatnot. And if you do not have the means to get clothing, get yourself like emergency blankets or just regular blankets if you can. Heavy wool blankets are best, but if you can't afford one of those, Mylar emergency blankets, those also work fantastic. If you're in a situation where you can't stockpile stuff, like let's say you're living in a college dorm or something like that, whenever I was in a situation where I couldn't stockpile, I just had like a bag, like a book bag, that I filled with bags of rice and beans, and that was my stockpile. And I just kind of had it in the corner. It was out of the way, didn't have to worry about it. You can find a spot to stockpile some preparedness stuff. Maybe you won't be able to get this if you're living on a college campus, but you could at least be ready for shortages. You could get yourself some batteries, you could get yourself some light, you could get yourself, you know, something to be able to be more prepared in the event that power goes out or things break down or something happens. Now, whenever it comes to these right here, getting yourself rounds in bulk is definitely a good way to go. These are cheap steel case tool ammo. So it's something that I can buy a lot of for not a lot of money. It's not the most accurate, not the most reliable, but I can have a lot of it for basically dirt cheap, and it is good enough to get the job done. Whenever you're stockpiling rounds, I always recommend that people get good quality rounds, but on top of your good quality rounds that you spend good money on, you can get yourself lots and lots of cheap stuff as well to be able to serve your purposes if you have to go out and do whatever it is that you need to do with these things. I don't care what platform you pick, I don't care what caliber you pick, I don't care what your own preferences are. If you decide to go with something, then that's what you decide to go with. But this right here is definitely a necessity, something that you can use to protect yourself. Definitely a necessity for dealing with a situation where the rule of law has broken down. And hell, like I said, I had people in Central Florida who were dealing with people that take advantage of emergency situations like a hurricane to do nefarious things. So yeah, bear that in mind. I think I covered all my basins without like talking about shelters and means of escape if you decide to bug out. Of course, you want to know where you're going and what you're going to do once you get there. And in the event that you have to live in the woods, you want to know how to get yourself shelter and whatnot, but that's way beyond the scope of this video. If you can manage to get yourself like proper tools and whatnot, like tools that aren't going to break, that are like solid steel, like an axe, you don't want just the axe head with like a wood or fiberglass handle. You don't want to have to rely on that for a life-sustaining situation. Get yourself like a full steel axe or a shovel that is nice and sturdy and stable so you don't have to worry about it breaking. I've had a lot of shovels break on me, and if you don't have resources to be able to replenish that lost supply, then you're basically dead in the water unless you want to make your own shovel, make that thing work, in which case, yeah, your makeshift thing is probably not going to be as good as a factory-produced full steel something that is designed not to break. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are down below. I'm eager to see what I've missed, but I think I've covered all the basic basins. However, there's always going to be more to do. Like, I didn't get into communication in this particular video, but in my case, I don't really have to worry about communication. I mean, I have a radio, one of those little ham radios, and I could use that if necessary, but besides that, I won't be doing much communicating. I'll be doing more listening. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below. Link to all sorts of stuff. You guys go off. Have a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next video. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen.
shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.